Hi, we're Team Procrastinate, and we're doing our presentation on milestones of diversity in American education. I'm Victoria.
I'm Emily.
I'm Shelby.
And I'm Melanie.
For the 17th century, we chose to do trade schools, and all four of us worked on. Before the kids would go off to trade school, they would go to a religion school so that they could learn to read. When the children were done with their religious school, they would go to a specific trade school to learn a certain apprenticeship under an apprentice of that trade.
The Who included Native Americans and European traders. There were the Spanish, English, Portuguese, French, and the Dutch. Some of the trades included slave trade, fishermen, and whalers. That was really helpful.
Trade schools were the most prevalent throughout the 17th century. As the 17th century came to a close, trade schools were less prevalent due to the immigration to America.
Trade primarily occurred in New England near the coast. Trade school learning occurred within small temporary settlements in the New England area. However, a lot of them were taught across the ocean in Europe.
Trade schools were important because children would learn for their future, because so many people were immigrating to America at the time, and also they started the American education system.
Our object that we chose is actually an image from Cold Springs, which is located in Cape May, New Jersey. In Cold Springs, they actually have a simulation where you can actually become part of the colonial culture, and you actually get to attend a colonial religious school as well as a trade school. And here are the references we found for the 17th century.
I'm Shelby. I did the 18th century with religion in the classroom. As the first schools and universities were being established in the colonies, there were no formal laws or regulations about the education system, so a lot of the classroom studies included religion. There were many religions in America at the time, or what was going to be America, and a lot of people from Europe were coming from Europe for religious reasons. The Who during this century included Puritans, Quakers, Presbyterians, and various Protestant groups. Mostly boys went to schools. Religion in the classroom began in the 17th century throughout the 19th century. Schools were generally located in the north in cities like Philadelphia and New York. For schools in the south, they were usually further away from the students' homes. Why, during this time period, a lot of religious groups were fleeing Europe to America for religious freedoms. This continued into the 19th century, however, it became less popular throughout the 19th century. My object is the colonial American flag because it symbolizes freedom in America, that many Europeans were coming to America for religious freedom. And these are my references.
My name is Melanie Travelli, and I did segregation, separate but equal, in the 19th century. Segregation was the separation of African Americans and Caucasians in public facilities, including schools. The separate but equal doctrine tried to validate segregation by saying it was not in violation of the 14th Amendment. Segregation and the separate but equal doctrine mainly applied to African Americans, trying to keep them separate from Caucasian Americans. Sometimes segregation was also applied to other races that were not of the Anglo-Saxon origin. The separate but equal doctrine was formulated in response to a court case named Plessy versus Ferguson, brought forth by a black man, Keith Plessy. Segregation occurred throughout the 19th century. The separate but equal doctrine was created following the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery. The 14th Amendment created protection of the law for all citizens, and it was in rebuttal to this. Segregation was applied to any and all states that wanted to participate in segregating public facilities. Segregation and the separate but equal doctrine was more prevalent in the southern states of the United States. Segregation was happening in order to keep blacks and whites separate in public amenities. Separate but equal was there to ensure to provide equal opportunities to blacks and whites. Unfortunately, it did not do so. The object that I chose were two pictures depicting schools of black Americans and white Americans and how they were separate but definitely not equal. These are the references I used in segregation for the 19th century.
I'm Emily, and I'm doing the 20th century, and I'm dealing with segregation in public school. What happened in the 20th century is that it was actually ruled that blacks and whites had to go to the same school because it violated the Equal Protection Clause in the 14th Amendment. The Who was Oliver Brown versus Board of Education, and it involved pretty much all of America because all schools were segregated at that point. The court case was decided on May 17, 1954, which was right before the African American Civil Rights Movement. The court case was held in the Supreme Court of the United States, and it was taken out of Topeka, Kansas. The why is because segregation was actually a violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. My representative object is a picture of Martin Luther King Jr. because this case led way into the African American Civil Rights Movement, and he's usually associated with that because of his famous speech, "I Have a Dream." And these are my references that I use for the project.
Hi, I'm Victoria Dean, and I did the 21st century, and I related it to lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and questioning community milestones. So what was the milestone? Gay straight alliances, also known as GSAs, were formed in 1988. They helped in creating the milestone, which is now known as the National Day of Silence. So who partakes in this day? Anyone can partake in the National Day of Silence. It is found throughout all different types of schools: elementary, middle school, high school, college. All ages are welcome to participate. This event is sponsored by Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network. When did this milestone take place? Well, it was actually created in the 20th century, but it didn't take off till the 21st century. It started in 1996, and it is now reaching its 15th year of celebration. This year, it is actually going to take place on Friday, April 11th. Where does this day take place? Well, it takes place all throughout the country. Anyone can participate in any of the school districts through the United States, through all different countries, anywhere. The event first took place in MacArthur High School in Levittown, New York. So why have a day of silence? Well, the Day of Silence is here to speak up for and be an advocate for anyone in the LGBTQ community who cannot speak up for themselves. During the Day of Silence, it is known to remain silent unless called upon by a teacher, to speak up by actually not talking for anyone who is bullied. My representative object for this event is actually a song by Macklemore and Ryan Lewis called "Same Love." This song speaks out against the hate and bullies for the LGBTQ community. In this song, Macklemore and Ryan Lewis are advocates saying how same love should not matter. They speak up against anyone who gives hate or any sort of reason to have the LGBTQ community without a safe place. And these are my references for the 21st century. Over the course of this project, I learned that throughout our early years of education, they left out a lot of important details when teaching us all of these major milestones.
I learned that over the years, our history in public education has progressed tremendously.
I learned that even though we keep progressing in education, there's always going to be something that we need to go back and fix.
I learned that diversity is America's past in the education system, and unfortunately there will always be something that'll come up in the future.
We're Team Procrastinate!